Welcome to the social-engineer.org podcast number 127. I am really excited about this one. Well, as I am with all of them, but this one's really special. Literally just a few days ago, the Human Hacking Conference first year just ended here in Orlando. And I thought there's a lot of people who were pinging me on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook and other mediums that were saying, I really wish I could have made it. What happened? So I thought, let me invite the workshop trainers on. And let's see if just a few of them could stop by the air quotes studio and have a quick chat about their session, what they took away from it, what we can expect next year. And I thought that would just help people who couldn't make it get a little taste about what the Human Hacking Conference first year was all about. So let's take a quick break, get a few of these guests on, have an awesome chat with them, and see what it is that we learned from this year's conference. We are back with our very first workshop trainer guest, Robin Dreeke. You're like a longtime friend over here at the podcast. How you doing today?
I am doing awesome. Excited to have attended the triumphant event, without a doubt.
I don't know if you just attended. You came and owned it, according to all the reviews we're getting.
Well, thanks. But I was, that's what was really great about it. I was excited to share my content as always, but I was even more excited to be an attendee because the cast of characters that you brought in was phenomenal. I mean, I've known these people, at least most of them, for most of my professional life and interacted with them, but we've never, ever been at the same venue altogether. So, and what you really capitalized on was the theme was tremendous because all of us, not just presenters and trainers, but the attendees, everyone was on the same sheet of music.
Yeah, it's an interesting event that like just thinking about what you said. I've never been in the same room, even though I've known all those people, had a chance to be on the podcast with them. I've never been in the same room with all of those people at one time either. And it was just such a great event for me to be a part of that too.
Yeah. And the thing, when we did that panel that night with me, Dov, and the others, it was what really struck me. It struck the entire crowd because that's what everyone was put on social media was that you call it the Human Hacking Conference and people might get a certain sense in their mind that it's about, kind of manipulation possibly or kind of making a process out of things. But really everyone there, it's about the deep understanding of others and human beings for the sole purpose of creating good, healthy relationships and also recognizing when people might not have your best interests at heart and holding no ill will towards them. So it really came down to it's a conference on deep understanding of human beings to make those great interpersonal connections for whatever it is you're trying to do in life.
I had a couple reviews that came in, and one of the things that was, I think, very validating for my team and I was people who said that they came to the conference, because they saw us at DEF CON, which is definitely a hacker type conference. But when they came here, they were just amazed at how they felt this community of people who were really out there just to help others learn to be better.
Yeah. And, while we're there too, it was probably the safest environment you could possibly be in it. And physical security is one thing, but I mean safe, like psychologically safe. No one there was there to take advantage of anyone. And that's both attendees and speakers. Everyone was there to help each other learn, grow, and collaborate together one-on-one and one-on group. It was just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, truly, truly amazing. So let's talk a little bit about your role there. So you had a workshop. What was your focus on the workshop at the event?
Yeah, so my focus was my code of trust and sizing people up, which is my step-by-step process for really understanding and demonstrating to others value and affiliation. Because that's what everyone is seeking and craving. They're seeking to be accepted by meaningful groups or organizations, and we're seeking to be valued by the same. So my workshop focuses on how to do that. And matter of fact, I rolled something out for your attendees that I've only done one other time. And that is we created what I call the leadership notebook. So actually people walk out with a very specific process on how to make things about how to make conversations about other people and how to actually work the code of trust in your life. And so that's what my workshop really focused on.
Yeah, and the feedback that we got from, well, I'll tell you, we had one major complaint about your workshop, which was it wasn't long enough.
I tried to get it all.
And I think we'll take that to heart for next year for sure, as people wanted to have more time and content. So what was the takeaway? Like, what was it that everyone sitting in the room was supposed to walk out of that room with?
The ability to strategize how to create great, healthy professional relationships and then apply it to every aspect of your life. So it really came down to, how do I actually do that? How do I become an inspirational leader? And so what I started out with, I took all the, I sat in a lot of the sessions of the other folks, and luckily I was towards the end. So even from Joe's session that morning, all the things he was saying about, this is a great person to be like, these are great behaviors to have. And so I started out highlighting what all the other great speakers had said, and then I said, now here's the tools of how to do it. So I actually broke down exactly how to do it. So it was really great because we all built flow into each other. So that's what they walked out with.
Yeah, which is another amazing part of that I thought, because that wasn't planned. I didn't ask you to, like, hey, can you talk to Joe? Can you talk to Dov and make sure you coordinate? But it was almost, people thought that we almost did that because they came and they were like, it just sounds like it's just so uniform.
And part of that too is you have professional speakers in there, and that are empathetic towards the attendees and empathetic towards each other. And so we really paid attention to each other. And a lot of us, we were, and this is the first time I've ever done this at a conference either, where I was scheduling all the other talks to go to. It's not because I didn't understand the content. I was looking for, because we're basically saying a very, very similar message, maybe focus on a particular area of our personal expertise, but we all had the same central theme. And so when you have professional speakers that have been doing this a long time, we want to build flow because we were there for the experience of the attendees. And that's what was really important. I thought, you had great breaks. And whether I was in attending a class or doing anything else, I made sure I was down there, and all the other speakers did too, on every single break, because you want to interact with all the attendees in a great positive way. And my voice was worn out. I mean, it was 4 straight days of interacting and talking. It just wasn't the 2 hours at a workshop. It was a long, exuberating 4 days.
Yeah, that's another comment that I got from a lot of attendees, is how they love that in the evenings, the workshop trainers. So, like, I know no one loves this comment, but the talent, they stuck around because, there's just so many conferences. I've been to these, like, and there's nothing wrong with them. I'm not cutting these conferences down, but there's like a separate room for trainers and a separate place. And what we tried to do was make sure that all of you guys stuck with the crowd. And we got a lot of appreciation for that you were available, that people could sit at a table at night, grab a drink, and have a conversation with you, even if they weren't able to sit in your class all day.
Absolutely. Matter of fact, the ending time at night was around 10 o'clock, I think, most times. And man, I was there. I was getting thrown out by the staff, just continuing conversations going. I'd get up to the room every night because, my wife came with me, and she had to, for the first time, experiencing what it's like to do my job and do these conferences. And when she first decided to come down, she said, "Oh, we'll be in Orlando for 4 days. It'll be wonderful. And you're only working 2 hours." And I go, "Nope, stand by."
No.
She never saw me once. It was great.
I feel bad for your wife. It's the first time we got her to come hang with us. Hopefully she had a good time.
She did, but it was great because she actually saw, hey, these are not vacations. These are experiences that we go when we are actually doing and sharing with each other like this.
So next year, so we ready? I know we have limited time with you, so I want to ask this question. Next year, you're coming back,
100%,
and we're obviously gonna have to take all the complaints and give you more time. So that's all there is to it.
100%.
Otherwise, we may have like people burning steaks in our front yard or something. So
that'd be awesome.
What can people?
Anyway.
Yeah, me too. What can people expect next year from your session?
So I'm going to do exactly what I did this year for people that didn't attend it or want a refresher on it. And there's always new content anyway. But what I'm going to have time for next year is then go into sizing people up. So I have the 6 signs for assessing trustworthiness in others. And so I'm going to add that portion of the workshop to it, so that way you're going to walk away with knowing exactly how to inspire trust and relationships with others from your behavior. And then we're going to flip it, and now we're going to assess, all right, what's my impact on these people, and what can I reasonably expect they're going to do? So it's a combining of both my recent books. So for your behavior, now we're going to assess other people's behavior, and they're going to be able to walk out with extremely cognitive, actionable tools to do both.
So they're going to, okay. So my brain was just thinking about a million things. Like, you could apply that literally to social engineering as a practice. So if you were in pen testing, you can apply that to just everyday conversations. You can apply that really to anywhere in life, what you just said.
Yeah, because when we're assessing others, we like to use our intuition a lot of times, which is flawed because it's very subjective, and a lot of times it's based on liking someone, which you have your overlapping morals, ethics, and beliefs and commonalities and things, but that doesn't really say what you can reasonably expect them to actually functionally do in a position where they have to perform a task or do something. And so that's what I break those two things apart so we can actually reasonably predict what people are going to do. And that way, and what's the purpose of it? So you can keep managing those expectations, so you can understand people at even a deeper level. So again, you don't ruin those relationships that you have and build upon them.
Yeah, and that's so. What about taking that skill? Like, will people learn this? Is what I meant to ask. Will people learn? What if you don't always do it right? Because I mean, these things are great, but sometimes all of us, even trained experts, mess it up, and we don't do it 100%.
Absolutely. Those are the moments in life where you're like, all right, I got something out of this. Winning is easy, when you understand these things. You find that your ability to interact with others becomes very, very calming and very easy. And now and then, though, you fall a little lax or you get a little emotionally attached and you might have the wrong words come out. And you see the impact on others because you become really hypersensitive to the impact you have on others when you do these types of things. And when you see that you might have wronged someone or you see that you might have said something wrong or whatever it is, it gives you the ability to really reflect effectively so you can grow from it and you can make yourself better from it. And also, so you can also make the amends you need to for the person that you might have wronged by accident.
Well, I'm sure people are going to be really enthused as they were this year to sit in the session. We can't wait, March 11 through 13, 2021.
It's on my calendar. First thing
It's
that's on my
out.
calendar for next year. Absolutely.
I know. Okay, so is that a little weird that we're actually planning stuff in 2021 and 2020 just started?
No, not for you. No, I've known you a long time, Chris. And, from the first time, we put together the social engineering training course together, when we held it out there in Seattle, I got to see you in what you do. You are about excellence, you're about high quality content, and you're about an experience for the people that come. And you never are satisfied with what you did last time. You want to make it better every time. And so why wouldn't you want to be part of that? Because as awesome as this was this year, I can't wait to see what you wind up doing next year because I know it's going to be better because you do. That question you just asked me. What happens when you fail or when you fall short? Well, since you're a perfectionist, you always think you're falling short. So I always know it's going to be even better. So which is hard to imagine.
Well, thank you for all that. But man, you remember that. That's like, God, that's going on 11 years almost.
Like yesterday.
That you and I were sitting in Seattle doing our very first APSE class.
Yep.
Wow.
And actually, we had a few of our students here at this one as well.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, one guy came up to me. I remember Ali. He said, "Hey, do you remember me 11 years ago?"
Oh, yeah. That's right. I saw it. That's right. He was in the first one.
Yeah.
Wow.
I recognize him from his gauges. He had rainbow ones and not black ones this time.
That's like, yeah, we're going up. Wow, that's over a decade ago that we met him, and now he's still going strong.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is crazy.
It is great
stuff. So between now and next year, so let's talk a little bit. Forget about the conference for a second. Your book just came out, and I want to do a separate podcast on that because but it's a brand new book. So just tell us a little bit about the book, the name, what the point is about it, what people can get out of it.
Sure. It's called Sizing People Up, and it is FBI behavioral analysts' 6 signs for predicting behavior. And what it is I go through these 6 signs of behavior prediction. It's kind of a follow-on to the Code of Trust, where I started realizing I was focusing so hard on other people and making it about them that I started realizing that, wow, human beings are actually exceptionally predictable in the sense that we're genetically and biologically coded to always act in our own best interests in terms of safety, security, and prosperity. All I have to do is start understanding what you think is in your best interest in terms of those things, and I now know what you're going to do. And so I have these 6 signs. First one is vesting. Second one is longevity. Third is reliability. 5 is language. And 6 is stability. And under each one of those, I have 10 observable tells for it and 10 observable tells against it. And so it's a lot of behavioral observation. It's a lot of information. But the good thing is it's shorter than the Code of Trust. And I was able to put at the end of each of those chapters of the 6 signs, I have what's called a chapter debriefing, which I love to death. I actually have mine in front of me, where it's 1 page of a key quote, the key message, and a summary, just bullet points of the content of the chapter. So it's kind of Dale Carnegie-esque, where at the end of each chapter of his book, he gives you the key points to take away. So once you read it once, you can actually take those pages and it becomes your little portable notebook that you can refer to.
Love that. I love that. As a matter of fact, when I was working on my present book, the author the guy who's writing it with me, he asked me, can you point out a couple books that you really like and why? And that was one of them, was Dale Carnegie's
Good.
book,
Point out
because
this one now.
yeah, well, it wasn't available a year ago, so I
That's
was
right.
waiting for it.
Hey, what's the name of your next book, by the way?
So we're still up in the air about that, but I can tell you the part that's going to be in it for sure, because you know how you're working with publishers and
Oh yeah,
we have our what's the word I'm looking for?
working
I'm like,
title.
yeah, like we have our desire on what we want it to be, and I kind of settled on something where I'm like, oh, I really think this is a great title, and then you pass it around to certain people, and you say like, hey, what do you think about this? And then the publisher comes in and they're like, well, I don't know. I think we like it, but we'll let you know in a couple weeks. So basically, it's Hacking Humans, a
Right.
master hacker's guide to winning friends, influencing people, and getting whatever you want. That's the working title.
I like getting whatever you want.
Because that's really what like social engineering is all about, and it's kind of funny because we're at the end of it. I keep calling him the author, but I guess that's me. But I feel like he's the guy who's really helped me just make this book amazing. But
Oh yeah, that's what happens
Seth,
when you work professional writers. They're
yo,
fantastic.
geez, it's just so much better than trying to. He makes you sound smart, right?
Oh,
But
absolutely.
he's like, man, it all boils down to something really simple. And I thought this was going to be super complex at the end, but it's really simple. And I'm like, yeah, that's the point. Is that if you just leave people feeling better for having met you, in the end of the day,
You stole.
you, yeah, which I give you full credit for.
I know.
But if you do that, you influence people and you get friends and you get whatever you want, because it's just nature. People want to help you out when you are good to them.
And that's one of the signs actually that I talk about in my book is if things start getting really overcomplicated and people are using really overcomplicated terms and scenarios, that's one of the signs of you got to really kind of take a step back and look at this, because open, honest communication and building trust is actually very easy and transparent. If it gets overcomplicated, that's when you got to take some pause, because really life is pretty simple.
Hey, guess who just joined us? R. Paul Wilson.
There you go. And it's a good handoff because I got to get on to my next thing. How are you doing, R. Paul?
I'm good. I won't take this personally.
I won't. I had such a good time with you. It was fantastic.
Yeah, it was a blast.
All right. So, Chris, I will sign off and I'll catch you on the flip side.
Okay, man. Have fun. And
Thanks.
we'll talk soon, and we'll talk about scheduling a podcast all about your new book, because I'm sure people are going to want more than that 1 minute snippet.
Hey, take care.
Well, good morning. How are you, sir?
I'm very well. How are you?
Oh man, this is a brand new style of podcast for us. So it's like I invited all the workshop trainers. A few of you can make it, and it's basically just people like, kind of like the idea of stopping in the studio, and we're going to talk for a few minutes about the podcast. And if you got to go, you go. You stay, you stay. It's all great. So we were just chatting with Robin about his session. So I think overall, what we had from the Human Hacking Conference was the same complaint about your session that we had about Ryan's, which was it was too short.
Yeah, I think I got to point one of my 10-point bullet list.
Okay, I'll take it. So you have 10 points. Wow. Okay.
It was something like that. I remember looking down at one point. We were almost halfway through, and I was still in point one. I thought, might need to pick up the pace a little bit.
Well, I was sitting through some of it before I got called out, and I thought, oh, this is going to go good, because you went over things really well. And when you said, are there any questions? Nobody asked. And then you kind of pushed the audience to ask some questions. And then soon as the hands started going up, I'm like, yep, he's done. There's no way he's getting through his material.
Right. It was interesting because for me, I was I think part of the thing about the whole conference is that there was an experimental nature to it, to do a cross sharing of what people's needs are against what we can offer over all the disciplines, right? And then the disciplines can then hone in on the needs of people. And some of that is kind of already ready for that. But for me, I was really looking to see there's all this stuff that I know connects with what people do to manipulate other people, how they control people's actions, how they how they can predict what people's reactions will be in given circumstances, and how verbal control can be used, and how physical control can be used, and perception can be manipulated, all that stuff. Obviously, that series of words can all interconnect with everything about social engineering. But for me, it was like, what are your needs? And so here's kind of a buffet of ideas. And some of it we can demonstrate, some of it is in performance. We do some tricks, but then what we don't do, when we're performing in a standard show, is we then talk about what was being done, right? That's the thing you don't do. That's the thing that gets me dragged out and killed by the magic circle. But that's okay, because they're all kind of really weak and little people. I can deal with those guys.
I hope no one drags you out and kills you. That sounds very serious.
Yeah, most of them haven't seen sunlight for 10 years, so I can deal with those guys. I think it was really interesting from that format to do something that, everyone's like, wow, that's amazing. And then one of them says, so what was happening there? And I felt licensed to say, well, I gave you a series of choices, but your choices were strictly limited to what? And then he could figure that out. And then I could talk about how I had a built-in prevarication, right? A way of changing your decision to create a different series of events. And those events are all dependent on the first thing. That's very much like building a dialogue with somebody that has an agenda, where you're trying to lay into the agenda something that is maybe going to compromise them.
So what was, just so people that weren't there, what was the main goal? What were they going to learn sitting through your session?
I wanted to show that there is a vast toolbox of manipulation and control that is very much untapped to the security community. But these tools relate very closely to what's being developed by negative entities, people who are looking to genuinely compromise. And I think that it was a matter of saying, okay, look, I'm going to open this box of tricks up for you, but I'm also listening to your questions, because the things that connect with you directly are the things that I want to explore deeper, not just in other events like this, but also I think I'm starting to hone in on what the next book is and what it's going to share and the value of it, because I'm an interesting individual. I'm not like the guys that do this professionally. All right. That doesn't mean I'm an amateur, but what it means is that I'm doing this for the television stuff like Real Hustle. I'm doing it for performance stuff. I'm using it in film, which, is my primary business. But I've got a vast catalog of examples and ideas that I kind of look at it and go, how do I narrow this down so it's useful to people? How do I open up that box of tricks and turn it into a toolkit for recognition or for giving people experience and examples of what's possible? And I think that was my goal, was to say, okay, I'm going to share something with you that is normally not shared. And together we're going to figure out where we should go next. And I think we did that. I think if that was the first session in the morning, then by the time we got to the last session in the afternoon, we would have found ourselves in some really interesting territory. But that territory would have been decided by the individual needs of the people in the room, which of course is distinct for everybody, but also the general needs of the community. So I was basically throwing open that box of tricks and saying, here's what we got, here's how this stuff works, but where do we take it next? And that was why we got to the end, and it was like, well, that's our 2 hours. And there were 9 points sitting right there, waiting to go.
And you heard it first here. We helped him develop a new book. So I think we have everyone in the room has a little piece of those author rights, right?
Yeah, I'll get my Scottish lawyer onto that. I'm sure
Scottish lawyer, they use claymores, right?
They do. Claymores and whiskey.
Hey.
By the way, I'm in my friend's house, which is populated mostly by dogs.
It's called a kennel.
Yeah. Basically, I'm in the best kennel in Las Vegas.
Hey, and guess who just stopped in? Dov, you here?
Hey,
I am, gentlemen. It's good to hear you both. Yeah, boy there. It's good to hear you both.
There's that Dov Baron voice.
Did you literally just speak in Gaelic or something?
No, I'm enjoying your dulcet tones.
Oh, well, not mine. You're enjoying his. Mine's more like a wannabe gangster because I lost my voice, you know?
Yeah, I know. I remember seeing that on the last day.
Yeah. So Dov, how you recovering after the show?
Well, I'm recovered. I was right back into it. So
Yeah, no time, right?
fully diving in the deep end and out at the UBC, which is University of British Columbia breakfast, the 2 days later, and doing for their fundraising event. So hanging out with some other friends that I know. So I'm back and I'm right in it.
So I'm going to ask you the same. I'm going to bounce between you both while I have you for a little bit. So, Dov, what was the purpose of your session at the Human Hacking Conference? What did people walk away with? And I know, don't say it in the always too short of time that we gave you, which we're going to fix that problem next year. But what was the purpose? What was the point?
Waste time?
Well, you didn't do that because we had some pretty emotional responses from your session.
Yeah. What people were to walk away with was what I call their dragon fire, a sense of their own dragon fire, how to connect to that to become what we call dragon leaders. And what that means is the understanding that you did not get your dreams, you did not get your hopes by some sort of fluke. That your hopes and your dreams are your heart and soul crying out for expression. So how do you tap into that and use it not only to have a successful business and do well in the world, but also to feel like a better human being and to live a more deeply fulfilling life in the process while making a greater difference. That's what it's all about.
And how does leadership play a role in that? How does the skills that you've kind of built your books and how does that work with that?
I think there's a great misconception about leadership. And people will say things like, well, I'm not a leader, or, but I don't have that position. Well, leadership is not a position. It's actually impact. Leadership is impact and influence. So Paul was actually teaching a leadership program, as was everybody in the event, because we were all talking about having impact and influence in a positive, healthy, well, except for Paul, maybe. But we're all talking about having positive influence. And so when you think about being a leader, you might go, well, I'm not really a leader. And I asked a question at the beginning of the presentation, which is, are you a parent? Yes. Okay. Are you a friend? Yes. Are you a member of a community? Yes. Then you're a leader because you have impact and you have influence. And you have a responsibility to do that from a conscious place, what you would call from a consciously socially engineered place, and realizing that you're having that impact. So leadership starts first and foremost internally with a level of responsibility and accountability to, I don't get to drift through life. I am having impact, so I'm responsible for that impact.
Let's take a quick break from the show and talk about what's going on in the world of SE. If you're hearing this podcast, APSE Orlando is happening right now. So there's no more chance to sign up for that. But don't get sad. There's a class in Bristol, UK, the 1st through the 5th of June. It's about 50% full right now, so you can get in for that. And we're not raising the price for a couple more weeks. We have the APSE 4-day class in Las Vegas at Black Hat. And that class is just about 50% full too. Maybe by the time this comes out, it will be over. That class generally sells out, and we have a smaller number that we take there. So feel free to get over to the site. You can just click on the link, and that will take you right to the Black Hat site for signing up for that. We have an OSINT class, 23 through 24 of September, practical OSINT for everyday social engineers in Denver, Colorado. It's going to be beautiful. Last year, that class was truly awesome. We had a lot of good feedback, so we're holding that again. And you can see all of that on the site. In just another few weeks, we'll be launching the Human Hacking Conference Year 2 registration, so check for that. A couple other things. By now, we have launched the DEF CON signups for the SECTF, the brand new OSINT CTF, and, maybe there's some inkling that there'll be the SECTF for kids and SECTF for teens, as well as the CFP call for papers coming if you want to speak in the social engineering village at DEF CON 28. Whew, I think that's about it. So why don't we get back to the show? So, because I think that is an important point, is that oftentimes, and I would be guilty of this growing up through my career, when you think of leader, it's opposite of what you were teaching us in your work session, where it seemed like to touch base with a true leader, you were really talking about having empathy, being kind, building people up, not so much this command and conquer type of attitude that maybe most people associate with leadership.
That's a great point now, Chris. You see, because the old model of leadership that we've had for as long as most of us can remember is that of command and control. Command and control leadership is do as I say, not as I do. I don't have to follow the same rules you do, and you are under the microscope and you will be micromanaged to do what we want you to do. In other words, it was a Borg mentality. Resistance is futile, do as you're told. That's not leadership today. As you know, in my book, Fiercely Loyal, I talked about leading millennials, and why I love millennials is they won't take that guff. They're not interested in that. They understand that leadership now, in many ways, the triangle as the pyramid has turned on its head. And so now we have to be understanding that to really get our people to do the best, to be innovative, to become loyal to us, there's a need for understanding of compassion, of empathy, for deepening emotional intelligence, and more importantly, in my opinion at least, is emotional maturity. Emotional intelligence, if you want to read about that, you can read Daniel Goleman's book. Most people do. He wrote the sort of the main book on it. And kind of that's the title, Emotional Intelligence. The challenge with it is that I've seen over my career is that many people have read that book, and that's what they did. They read it, they didn't integrate it, or they're using it on other people. But actually, emotional intelligence must be used on yourself first so you can develop emotional maturity. And emotional maturity is not only self-recognition and self-knowledge, but self-application to what it is you're learning. So you have to be willing to look into yourself. As we talked about in the session, that's part of the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell outlined and Carl Jung talked about, is this journey to look into what is called the dark cave. And that is the cave that we fear to look into. And if you're a Star Wars fan, as I talked about in the audience, if you're a Star Wars fan, you'll remember that there's a point where Yoda sends Luke into the cave to battle his darkness. And Luke says, who will I find in there? Vader? And he says, maybe. And he goes into this very, very dark cave. He's in there, and he finds this seemingly Vader he goes to battle with. And at the end, he beats Vader inside the dark cave and pulls off his helmet, and he sees his own face. It's that willingness to look into our own darkness that gives us emotional maturity and allows us to find our purpose, to find our dragonfire, and to genuinely serve the world at the highest possible level.
You just touched every nerd's heart in the world, by the way. Now, I don't know. Did you guys?
I mentioned Dragonfire.
Yeah, I mean, it's all over. It's all over.
I am now the king of nerds.
Yeah, you are. I mean, I'm signing up for your session. I mean, I don't care what you're talking about. You're talking about dragons and Star Wars. I'm there.
Right.
Did you guys feel an energy shift like a few seconds ago? like an orb energy shift? Because I feel. Oh wait. Oh, there it is. There it is in the background. Stephanie has entered the room.
Hello, Stephanie.
Oh man.
Hi guys.
How are you doing,
Hi,
Stephanie?
I'm very well. Thank you.
It's impossible for you to come into a room and not to feel it.
It's so funny because it's a cyber room. It's not even a physical
Doesn't matter.
room.
I think we could feel your smile through the internet, no matter where we are. I believe that's just the way it is.
Movement in the force.
See?
Oh,
See?
that's so
Oh,
funny.
there he goes again. Movement in the force. This is ridiculous. So everyone on this podcast now has an accent except for me.
Oh, you have one. It's just not as cool as ours.
Well, that's a good point.
This is true.
That's a good point. Mine is definitely uncool compared to the lot of you here. So, Stephanie, I'm asking you the same question. We got R. Paul here. We got Dov. I mean, I know it sounds like a broken record, but the three of you had the same exact complaint about your sessions from the conference attendees, which was it was too short. So we have to fix that for next year because we obviously didn't give you enough time to accomplish what people wanted you to accomplish there. But with that being said, you accomplished quite a bit because the feedback is amazing, really. I mean, some really emotional people about some of your sessions. You and Dov had some very emotional feedback from people who sat through your sessions and people who felt touched in the heart by what they were learning. So what was the purpose? What was it you were trying, and obviously did, but get across to the people that were sitting in your room?
I know this it sounds very sort of like corporate hippie of me, but my purpose and my goal every time I get up and speak or train or work with a client individually or a large group is to ultimately help people find their voice, their message from the inside out. And I always do it coming from a place of love and authenticity. So I try and work with my audience. I try and read them. I ask them questions. I try to give them what their needs are at the time, whatever that is. So I started my session, and as when I arrived, I'm like, can I change my room? Can I do that? Then I spent a couple of days at the conference, and I was actually out in the field talking to the people that were coming to my session, and started asking them questions around what did they do, what did they want to learn, and then I once again shifted some of the exercises that I was doing so that I could basically give them what they were looking for and talk to some of the issues and needs that they had around story and emotional content. And I think that might have been part of the success, was I was really giving the audience what I believed that they had asked for.
That wasn't me.
No, that was my
way.
alarm telling me get on the
Oh.
podcast at 8:15. I'm already here.
Oh.
I finished up with my client a little early, so that's why I came on a little early.
So when before you came on, we had Robin on earlier with and R. Paul, who's still here, and they made a comment about how it seemed like, even though none of you spoke about your sessions beforehand, there seems to be quite an interesting meld amongst the themes of what all of you were teaching. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because we're all humans, and each one of us are speaking to human qualities that we have, and that biologically, I mean, there's a lot of talk about neuroscience at the conference. There was a lot of talk about the limbic brain, and however you look at it, we all have that brain, right? So I think that's part of the reason why there was a bit of crossover, and we all approached it from very different ways, but we're all dealing with our biology. And the Human Hacking Conference is talking about how we hack into that for success.
And R. Paul, the magic circle hasn't come and kidnapped you yet, have they?
No, but that's why I've got these dogs here. They're keeping an eye out for me.
He was talking about how the magic circle is going to come and try to kill him for releasing some of the secrets that he did.
Oh,
now how does the things that you taught tie into this? So we're talking, with Dov and with Stephanie, we're definitely on the psychological level here, but there's a tie-in with the things that you taught there. And how do you think those things also correlate to the skill sets that they were teaching?
Well, everything that I've explored in the areas of deception that I'm looking at, which is magic and con games, and having the experience of pulling so many con games for real, has proven to me that it's all very much based in human psychology and human need. And that thing I always say about, if I know what you want, I can take everything you have. But the other thing that I identified almost 10 years ago, we were talking about how magic worked and how con games worked. And it was interesting watching Dov's talk, because the core ingredient to all of this is story. Whether it's a story that we weave and construct, or it's a story that we try to take part in. So everybody has their own story. And a lot of con games rely on weaving yourself into somebody's existing narrative, whether it's the needs that they're looking for, or it's what they already have. And story is compelling, right? I think that we're all story engines and we're all addicted to storylines. And magic kind of does the same thing. Magic kind of creates a fantastic event, an effect. But when it's really effective is when there's an emotional element. And that emotional element, again, connects to people's existing knowledge and needs. And so story is hugely important. And I think the psychology of how people look at what they're seeing and how they analyze what they're experiencing is, and also when they do that, is controlled in magic. It's controlled in con games. And I believe it's controlled in any attempt to manipulate people. So I think taking those tools and looking at them and saying, look, this is a very powerful thing and it absolutely works. I can lay out 4 distinct choices and you apparently have a completely free choice. However, I know that 88% of the time people are going to pick this one because of the way that they see those choices, the way they're laid out before them, and the way that they're offered the opportunity to select one. That's the core of many magic or mentalism tricks. But it's also the core of how some deceptions are constructed. You play a numbers game. If 10,000 people are going to walk past your stall where you have some kind of crooked setup, and you're only going to get 20% of them, that's plenty of people. And if 20% of those people will go the way you want them 80% of the time, then that's how that works. And starting to see how we can codify that is really interesting.
So this is an interesting tie-in, Stephanie, thinking about your session on storytelling, whereas you're focused on storytelling in more of an empowering way. The empowerment from our Paul's session is coming from understanding how that can be used against you.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 2 sides to that coin. Like, one, here's how you use it to teach, to educate, to touch people's hearts, but here's also how it can be used against you, and you need to know that so you don't fall victim to some of these scams that are being used every day.
And it's interesting because of the way our brains work. And if you look at Antonio Damasio, the neuroscientist, and his work, a lot of his work is based around consciousness. But in one of his studies, he discovered that when he was working with a lot of patients who had damage to the brain where emotions were created, he discovered that they could talk logically and reasonably about making a decision, but couldn't actually make the simplest of choice. Now, with that kind of a finding, we realized that we make all our decisions based on our emotions, and it goes through our limbic system to our neocortex, and then it goes back to our limbic system to check, how do I feel about that? Okay, this is a decision, how do I feel about that? So it goes back and forth until we make the final decision, but it's always based around our emotions. So it's like whether you're tantalizing the limbic system for a fantastic, positive, entertaining, loving story, or whether you're tantalizing the limbic system through fear because you're trying to get people to make a decision and for a negative purpose. It's the way our brains work. I mean, I think Joe Navarro said in his session, which I absolutely loved, you're either in comfort or discomfort, but your brain is constantly in fear. So you're either trying to make people comfortable or uncomfortable based on whatever the story is that you're telling, whether it's for good purposes or negative purposes. And I find that fascinating.
And Dov, how much does emotion or understanding emotion, let's word it that way, because I know emotion has a play, but understanding people's emotions and how they are created and made and used, how much does that play into your session and how you were trying to help people with understanding their internal potential?
Well, as Steph just said, I mean, there's no decision that's made without an emotional content. But what we don't understand, and I've actually written a lot on this, and it's part of my next book, which is, let me ask you a simple question, Chris. What's 2 plus 2?
4.
Okay. Stephanie, what's 2 plus 2?
22.
Paul, what's 2 plus 2?
4.
Guess he left.
No, he said 4.
He said 4.
Okay, good secret. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not on his secret channel. You are. So the answer is, of course, 4 logically.
Yeah.
But emotionally, 2 plus 2 is a giraffe. 2 plus 2 is a chair. 2 plus 2 is anger. So we have rational logic, and we have an emotional logic equational system.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And the emotional logical equational system, which is what I've written so much about, is the understanding of neuroassociated memories. And neuroassociated memories are not true, they're just neuroassociated. So therefore, if you see a chicken, for instance, my wife sees a bird coming close to her, she has a complete freak out. Why? My wife is not 12 years old, she's not 6 years old, she's a full-grown grandmother. So why does she have a freak out? Because when she was a kid and she was born in Fiji and lived in Fiji, she had to go get the chicken eggs out of the coop and she was attacked by a cockerel. Now she has a neuroassociated fear around birds and bird feathers. That's not logical. It's not rational. And you can look at it and go, well, get over it, girl. I mean, geez, you're a grandmother. But that's not how it works. 2 + 2 equals fear in that case. So understanding how we have our neuroassociated emotional logic is incredibly empowering, because we can then decide whether we want to do something about it or whether we don't. So, for instance, as you know, Chris, as some of you know who were in my room, in 1990, I fell off a mountain and got smashed to pieces. I was free climbing and fell approximately 12 stories. I now have a fear of heights. I have no interest in removing it. I have a complete ability to remove it. I actually remove other people's phobias and all the rest of it. I'm highly skilled at doing that. But it's a fear I actually choose to keep, because it stops me from doing some of the crazy adrenaline things that I used to do. So it's a neuroassociation is really important to understand how we neuroassociate, because that determines, as we talked about in our workshop, determines how the hypothalamus reacts and responds. And the hypothalamus of the brain is called the mood and appetite center, and that determines the neurochemical cocktail that is released from your brain.
Yeah.
If you have a neuroassociation that love means hurt, and you start to feel yourself going in love, you may react by getting quite aggressive because it equals hurt, and you're trying to protect yourself. So all these things are really vitally important. Understanding how to hack ourselves, how to understand others, how to lead others, how to lead ourselves. It's powerful.
Can I jump in there?
Please.
And one of the things that, I touch on, because of all the work that I've done with actors and my own experience 30 years as an actress, is that Dov talked about emotions being chemicals. He kind of touched on that. They're chemicals that we can actually control. As he said, I don't want to work on my fear of heights. And that's what actors do, is act truthfully under an imaginary circumstance. They've essentially figured out a way to use their chemicals or emotions as tools and create scenarios in their brain that they can see, follow. Dov also talked about emotional history, when he went into what happened with his wife and the birds and the reason why she's afraid of them now. Actors create all that scenario in the background so that they can draw on those memories and those emotions when they need to create something for an imaginary circumstance that's happening right now that needs to be shot for a film set. So it's fascinating that we can use those emotions and we can switch gears in our brains, and whatever we choose to believe through our own stories, we can.
So, Paul, this is, we're talking about understanding your own emotion, but also understanding other people's emotion. Does emotion play a big part in your session and understanding how to use magic or how to use sleight of hand or deception or things like that?
Absolutely. I think it's one of the core reasons why a lot of magic is extremely, maybe impressive, but ineffective in terms of how, people see it. It's just because many people who perform it are focused primarily on methodology, and they're not particularly interested in doing more than exploring the art form from their perspective. What's amazing is when you encounter one of the few, and there are few, who understand that it's not what people see, it's so much as what people feel in the moment. And again, it goes back to that thing of being storytellers. And it also goes to, what Stephanie was saying about, how actors prepare to be in a moment when, time is short on set. And obviously, I'm a film director as well. I work with actors. And it's not just about preparing for the particular scene or script, but it is about all that work that they've done to access emotions and to portray in the moment is phenomenally important and relates very much to what we're talking about with SE, where giving people experience in the possible ways of being targeted creates that back catalog of emotional memories and reactions that will suddenly activate when a completely different and entirely unseen strategy is used against them, but they recognize the feeling that they had before when they engaged with it. And magic uses that too. It uses moments that are extremely familiar to people that they don't suspect, and suddenly that is actually used as a way of doing something sneaky or getting something past them so that, they're unaware of it. And we have a really great saying in Magic that actually a friend of mine came up with, which is that misdirection is the worst word in the world, but it's always used in Magic. Really, they're very good magicians. They apply direction. They direct the audience towards the effect and away from the method. And that's kind of exactly what we do in a con game. We direct people towards the story and away from the deception. So yeah, emotional element is incredibly important. And the more that you can access that and the more that you can stimulate that, the more you can achieve in any interaction.
Mhm.
It sounds like next year is going to be 3 days of therapy for everybody.
Well, what I found really interesting is that I think we talked about this on the weekend, is that one of the most positive things people had to say about the weekend was about how the human interaction was important and incredibly rewarding, also valuable to what they were learning. When, of course, that's kind of what's at the core of SE as a whole. So the topic itself, the subject, actually fed the experience of the weekend. And so I think that was one of the best indicators to how important the weekend is and how far it can go in the future, because it's a very deep topic. And the more people engage with it, I think the more people will understand how to protect themselves. I think so many of these things concentrate on the technical aspect of security, and that's very important. But as we've said before, the human element is where there's always a weakness, and the more we can educate, and the more we can protect.
Yeah, some of the feedback that we had on that realm, what you were just saying, were how to even increase that. We had a couple people suggest things like, set up questions, like 3 things you want people to know about you that goes on a badge for the evening events, so people can walk up and start conversations with you. We had some really interesting
Cool.
ideas
cool.
that were submitted. Yeah, it was like someone put an idea in that said when they submit their thing, like have them put 3 things that you want people to know about you, and it goes on a badge that you wear to all the evening events, so someone can walk up, see those 3 things, and start a conversation with you.
Didn't I suggest that? I think I suggested that.
No, not
taking
unless
credit for somebody else's ideas.
yeah.
Well, that's my job.
Is
But
this
I did,
misdirection? I don't understand. No.
It's called a
I
heist.
think that one of the registrants was talking to myself and Ian Rowland at breakfast on the Sunday, and they were talking about the game Two Truths and a Lie.
Right, that was another a referral that came in.
Yeah, it's the same sort of idea where you could basically put that on your badge, and not until the very last night would you highlight what the lie was.
Yeah, have you guys ever played that game, Two Truths and a Lie?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so that
with my
what our Paul was saying was I thought it was an
yeah.
interesting suggestion. So in essence, you have 3 statements that all 3 could be plausible, right? So not something like I have a magic carpet, but you have 3 statements that could be plausible, and 2 of them are truths, and one of them is a lie. And similar to the other suggestion where you have 3 things about you on a badge, you have these 3 things. Everyone knows it's the game, and you play it throughout the weekend by interacting with people at the evening events. And then on the final day is when people tell you which one of those 3 was the truth and which one wasn't.
It's so interesting. I used that in one of my exercises, not the 2 truths and the lie.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So in my repetition exercise where everybody sat opposite their partner and had to start reading behavior, I said start with either a lie or something truthful about yourself, but don't make it so outrageous that, make it something like I was born in Fiji and, whatever. So that,
Right.
so that the person is trying to gauge whether it's a lie or whether it's, if it's the truth. But I used a component of it before they went into the repetition exercise. And that's kind of interesting that you guys brought that up. Huh.
Yeah, it was an attendee that said this would be a cool game and a way, because there were some people who were there that said they had a really hard time, even though they loved the evening events, they didn't know how to go up and start conversations with people. So if we prompted it with something on a badge, it almost forces people to come up, look at the badge and be like, oh, you're into, this, you love playing with this game or whatever. And then they have this topic to now talk about.
That's cool.
Yeah. Okay. So I know we're coming to the end. I love this concept of having you all stop in for a little bit and talk about it. Let's just close with one thing. Stephanie, let's start with you.
Oh God.
What next? No, it's going to be simple.
Okay.
Next year, believe it or not, I mean, this is crazy. We put for all the alumni that came, we gave them the ability to sign up early. I'm very happy with seeing how many people are doing that. So, what do you want people to look forward to in your session for next year?
Oh, you know me. It's always about fun. I think,
Yes.
learning through fun and laughter is how I roll. So my quote is, if you're not having fun, then neither is your audience. And that's how I roll. So we'll be learning through fun, engagement, and having some laughter.
Awesome. And I'm just going to do this little promotion for you here. You just released an ebook.
Yes,
so tell
I
us the title of that.
The ebook title is The Why Guide to Story Hacking, which is basically captivating the heart and soul of your audience using storytelling hacks. So I go into the biology and the neuroscience behind why storytelling works and how to use it.
Where can they get it?
They can get it online at the website executivestoryteller.com. That's executivestoryteller.com. And if they want a discount code, it is capital HACK, hack for the number 4 and the letter U. Hack for you is the discount code.
Okay, I'm writing all that down. And Dov, same question. Not about Stephanie's book, about the other question.
I was going to say, I don't know enough about it, mate.
Feel free to talk about it. I'll be fine with that marketing.
What can people expect to gain from your session next year?
If you really want to understand your own emotional logic, if you want to understand the emotional equations you've built, and you want to understand the people that you lead by recognizing their emotional equations, then you're going to love this session. It will be about dragon leadership. It will be about what it means to be a dragon. And what I want to say to you is you're going to discover this, that dragons are revealed in fire. Dragons are revealed in fire. Many people are consumed by fire. What that means is there's an event that happens and it destroys them. But those who are dragon leaders, it doesn't destroy, it transforms them. You're going to discover the dragon fire within you. You're going to discover the fire that's been given to you to reveal the dragon that you are. You're going to understand your own emotional equations so that you can apply them to yourself, understand yourself at a deeper level, and develop emotional maturity as well as emotional intelligence. And you're going to be able to use that to empower yourself with a strategic advantage to everything you do, mentally and emotionally.
Awesome.
And we'll have a really good time.
I love it. Paul, same exact question. People coming next year, what can they expect to walk away with? Hopefully getting through more than one of the 10 bullet points, but what is the main takeaway?
The goal I want to give people is a toolkit for recognizing deception. And we do that by engaging with it, experimenting with it, playing with ideas, and then relating those ideas directly to what is possible in seemingly normal interactions. That toolkit for deception is to give people a taste of something so they'll recognize that taste or they can smell it when it's being targeted against them or against their people. And that's the real goal, is to take these really powerful tools, which are used in one field for entertainment and another field, exactly the same tools are being used for nefarious purposes and for the use of targeting individuals and corporations. And, I said in the talk, there's several casinos, and this is casino business, which is not the same, but it does relate. Several casinos were beaten by a system that, had they read the basic book on card tricks, they would have recognized what was being done against them in 5 minutes. But they didn't, and they lost millions, and the whole thing ended up in court. That type of knowledge is so easy and so engaging and so rewarding to play with, not for the purpose of turning you into a professional con artist or deceptionist, but to give you the ability to recognize something that without that experience, you would dismiss as being impossible or completely unfeasible. I can show you that it isn't, and I can make you recognize it when it comes up. And that's what we're going to do next year.
Awesome. I cannot wait to be back together with you guys in Orlando next year. Thank you so much for stopping in today and having a chat with us and just talking about your experience there.
Thank you so much for inviting us, Chris. It's a pleasure and honor. A great time at the event. And if you are listening to this and you're thinking about coming, do your very best to go to every session. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Because it brings in so many great speakers and trainers. I wanted to go to every session and I had to miss a ton of them. So if you get to be there, please be there. You will love this event.
Oh,
I did.
I think it should be mandatory. I mean, if you have a brain, you need to be at the Human Hacking Conference in 2021. I mean, seriously, that's just how I feel about it.
Thank you.
So you're saying that most people shouldn't come?
No, I said if you have a brain, you should be there. Like, you know, understanding how your brain works and understanding how we communicate. And, you know, there's just so many amazing things that people are teaching and training, and there are so many amazing gifts, like seriously, that are being bestowed on the audience by, you know, the people who are there sharing their expertise. I mean,
I think as a whole weekend, the experience was incredibly valuable to everybody, and everybody could see how they would take that information, that beginning of the information they were having, into their own world and use that experience. And I think that this is going to be an incredibly difficult convention to get into in the years to come. So yeah, this is the beginning and people need to get on board for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Another amazing show. Awesome to have all those guests just stop in. I know it was a long conversation, but I can't say it enough how great it was just to have all of those folks at the Human Hacking Conference, but then to have them stop in and just spend a few more minutes talking to us about it. I can't wait for next year. So if you want to check out details on that, sevillage.org is where all that's held. You can find us at social-engineer.com for corporate stuff, social-engineer.org for all of our free resources and education. You can ping me at Twitter at Human Hacker or corporate at SOC Engineer Inc. and anything to do with SE Village at SE Village. Please check out Innocent Lives Foundation. On Twitter, we're at innocent.org or innocentlivesfoundation.org. We really need your help, support, donations, work, all of the above. We can use it. So head on over there and check that site out. Thank you so much for all the positive feedback, all the great reviews on the podcast. I'm glad you're liking the new format. And I guess we'll talk to you next month. See ya.